Hello. Hi.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you. So thank you very much for the invitation to come here. It's wonderful to be back in Bucharest, actually. It's a city I know a little from working across the last 15 years in and out of here. So I'm going to talk today and follow on from Neil about my work and other people's work and a bit more of a history of this area, of the more experimental side of what's happening in relationship to digital technologies and our bodies, our living, emotional, real bodies. And this work I've been doing across the last nearly 30 years now, actually, I put under a banner called the Internet of Bodies, and looking at our aliveness, our connectedness, and our collectiveness, and some future thinking around that. So, as we all know today, and here I'm sure there's much talk about these physical and virtual worlds that are coming together, that are blending and merging, and shifting the way that we start to approach. One question came earlier about identities. Now, identities are shifting massively. We're actually in a much more hyper-enhanced and multi-sensory place, as Neil actually pointed out to us. And our collaborations today are much more immersive and connected. And innovations, we must be diverse and we must be inclusive. So I'm going to show you some of our work and some of other people's work to actually take us through to future points, and then I'd love to get questions from everybody and thoughts. Just a little bit about the work that I do. I'm in a design collective, a group that's based in East London called Body Data Space. We are what it says. We work with the body and data in virtual and physical space. So looking at responsive technologies, virtual physical networks, interactive environments, and what we call collaborative share space, which I will go on to explain in more detail. For us, the body is the interface that we need to take into the digital world. And so we collaborate and connect and enhance through the body with a group of about 30 of us, actually, some of us working together across the last 20 years. Our interest is in liveness. And what is liveness? Now, I'm going to explain a bit more. I come from a performing arts background. So for me, the essence of liveness, of being here today and being able to look in your eyes, to be able to talk to you afterwards, is very important. And on this chart, you'll see things you recognize about immediacy, intimacy, presence or absence, many other areas like memory that we can gain from liveness. And our liveness is always on, even when we're asleep. We're breathing, our hearts are beating. This is our mission statement, something we wrote about 10 years ago. It's a set of words which are all to do with human interaction, but they are also today are completely relevant within the world of digital and digital technologies. We can collect today, we can locate, both digitally and physically. We can touch, both digitally and physically. We can respond, converse, educate, diversify. And this is what we're interested, this blurring edge of it. So body data space exists to blend and converge. And we curate, we consult, we make large pieces of work, we commission, we do whatever it takes to put together ideas around live presence, telepresence, virtual presence. We work with avatars and robotics, human representation side, wearable computing, motion, sense, and gesture tech, and focusing on our living bodies as the interaction canvas. Telepresence, I'm going to do a very quick overview on, is actually an area I've been working in since the early 90s. I worked in this from my dance background. We started to connect 2 or 3 distant stages for dance performances between London and Helsinki, London and Arizona, various other places, and exchanging our body knowledge using the internet, of course, and digital videos to explore creative ideas together. This is a process which actually involves more than dance. Of course, we're working here more like live television. So there's film cameras in the room. It's full-bodied, what today is Skype, basically, but using the full body and the living body and working in real time simultaneously between 2, 3, maybe more venues. We're layering skin on skin. We were very interested in trying to get the intimacy into these. This work started in about early 2000s. We did a whole series of projects called Skin Touch Feel and Cell Bites, trying to get to a more tele-intuitive point of view, using a methodology where we're weaving together the body, the technologies of the day, and also the content in a plaiting or a braiding, simultaneously looking at these things together to blend the virtual and the physical. We're very interested in virtual touch. Still not totally possible, but digital intimacy and teleintuition. How do we get there? How do we actually start to reach a point when we are in different countries, where we are distant to each other, but feel the same connectivities? A different type of liveness, but the liveness that we all start to work and play in today. We work with the macro and the micro, playing with the body and the body parts, the layers of skin and touch. And today, of course, we move on into what we would call a hypersensory body. Now, many of these things that are on this chart are data transmitted from your body and taken out into other places and brought back to you, either as the same data or as an equivalent data. And actually, even on your smartphones on you today, it's amazing what we hold. The audio, the visual, the proximity, the location. We now do touch, of course. We're doing iris recognition. And even the other areas, smell, taste, haptic touch, are well on their way in development in relationship to transmission and reception from and to the body. So this puts the body at the center. Of course, all of this digital transmission we can turn off. I think that's an important point to make. You can, of course, and I do, on holiday, turn it all off and just stay in our live selves. A few works that we've done across time, commissions, which have looked at the virtual mediations. Here, a virtual world where you can visit with your avatar. You can enter through Telepresence or via Twitter, creating objects within the virtual world. Using biofeedback, early work where you're linking together with other people using breath and heart monitors and creating group visuals and group sound scores around you. And another biofeedback project by an amazing artist called Marco Donnarumma. This is a body muscle proprioceptic band that you put on the wrist or the ankles, etc. And you can move data around you, sound, visuals, etc. He uses it for performances, totally usable in gaming, in work data, etc. It reads, I think, 5 different flows of his body: his heartbeat, his breath, the movement of the blood in the body, his temperature, and also the muscle movement itself. Takes that data and uses that to shift things around himself and to create new data. Here we have dancers working with live avatars, building up digital intimacy, and robots looking at the touch of the human, a project that's been all over the world, actually, the Blind Robot by Louis-Philippe Demer, which is basically a robot touching humans, something that we are going to be much more moving into in the future as robots come more into our health systems too. Synesthesia, sound and seeing sound, and 2 senses merging together. Neil touched on this. There are many people, and maybe probably in the crowd today, who actually, when they hear sound, they see colour. When they have a touch, they see colour, or they feel sound. And there's much more exploration going on of the integration of our senses, the fact that potentially we have 32 senses, not 5 or 6, and that those are extending around us. This is with a deaf choreographer, Shisato Minamura. So coming back to this phrase, collaborative share spaces. We're really interested in this space in the middle, the place where we, as an individuals, enter and share with others. And the actual distributed content and multi-access points that we can reach through that. We are all involved in these these collaborative share spaces already. Facebook is a collaborative share space, yeah. All of our social media are actually pretty basic collaborative share spaces and are shifting already and hinting towards their futures. Performances, live streams, and augmented reality virtual worlds. But one thing we do know in collaborative share space is that you can't just flaneur. You can't stand on the edges and observe. It's a participatory space. And you've got to choose what you put in there and what you don't to share with others. And who are those others you do share with. And those are choices that we all make. In 2007, collaborative share spaces, in their fullest conceptual form have issues. We are still struggling to deal with the simultaneous needs for mobility and immersion. The moving around of our data on smartphones, etc., but actually wanting to share the data and be part of it as a whole. And also for this virtual and physical presence blending. Virtual reality, the tool of today, and I'm sure I haven't managed to go around yet to the conference, but I'm sure there's plenty here, yeah, is the immersive tool that we could all play in today. But it is highly disembodying, and it's not very mobile yet. It's also not a new idea. We can go back in history and look here at Hugo Gernsback, very, very big pioneer, started the first science fiction magazine, was really out there, actually. And this is an image you've probably all seen. It's been floating around social media for a while. These are his TV glasses from 1963. And Steve Mann, some of you may know, based in University of Toronto, actually from the early 80s has been working with glasses and immersion headsets, and is recognized, and even actually by Google, as the person that actually was the father of this more wearable computing area. Look up his work. It's fascinating what he has done throughout his career. And this one, again, did the rounds on social media. And for me, it's kind of proof that virtual reality is separating us. It is not bringing us together, enabling us to share physically in the same space. I find this picture quite amazing. That it's from last year in Barcelona, MWC, the mobile conference there. And of course, as you can see, I mean, great, they all got headsets on their seats and they put them on. They didn't see Mark coming in. But also, it's quite amazing, the breakup of them as they've come together live, but they're not together live. Plus, it's all men. It's all men there. So virtual reality is, of course, there are many groups worldwide really pushing the edges on it. This is a group in London called Bossa Studios who are working with haptic interfaces at a very deep level. But I'm sure there's some in Romania, everywhere, people linking up, trying to get further in relationship to what we feel, what we do, how we viscerally interact within that virtual reality space. And an artist in London called Mark Farid, who's exploring what does this really mean to be if we were in virtual reality headset for 27 days in a row. And so here, he's working actually with colleagues of mine on learning to eat, learning to sleep. This experiment will take place probably in about a year's time. They're doing testing at the moment. And he will do data reportage from this. Another student project, which actually is a headset that reads your breathing and your pupil size as you read interesting stuff online. Now, I think this one would be quite useful, because actually what it does is, as you show your interest through pupil size and breathing, it bookmarks it for you. And so you're starting to get directly what you need from your reactions. Your biofeedback tells the computer what to do for you, what to hold for you. But I don't think we're going to be doing this. And this, again, has been on the rounds in the viral circuit. This is not where we're going. So for me, as somebody that's very interested in our natural and living and full bodies, we're not on this route. I'm going to show you now a project that we did in 2012, the Olympics here in London, at the National Theatre on the South Bank. It's called Me and My Shadow, and it converged a virtual world, a very large sim, with human gestures and movement from full body work, telepresence, and motion capture. It was based, actually, in 4 countries simultaneously. And I should be able to show you a video now. Oh, no, got to go back again. There we are. We had these boxes in Istanbul, Paris, Brussels, and London. At the same time, across a 2-week period, about 9,000 people across the 4 countries entered and joined each other in this large virtual space. Depending which country you're in, you had a different colour body. You also had these pulses, these ripples are related to your liveness and different sounds. And we gave people very simple instructions, actually to just try to reach the middle of the sim up below the moon and try to hug each other. Not possible really, but to create an intimacy in reality. And here what we were interested in was looking at this blend, this virtual physical blending. Actually, how do you tell when you're in one space or the other? And meeting other people and creating intimacy. It was a great project, really great success, but it still had its limitations. Boxes are even less mobile than virtual headsets, and it was a 1 person at a time, 4 people at a time really, in 1 in each country experience. You were sharing it with 3 others, at a distance, in real time. There were some nice encounters. This is a mum and a son, John, who actually did time their encounters, 1 in Paris, 1 in London, to be in there together, and actually did find each other and tweeted this out. So we had some lovely, great stuff coming back from it. But what is next? For this is a type of a collaborative share space that I'm interested in. This next decade feels really important because we're at a point where all the tools are coming together and we can start to converge and react to our natural human needs, our natural needs for collaboration and co-creation together, for mobility and for immersion, virtual and physical presence, and actually more importantly for intimacy and sensuality within that liveness. The hypersensory self needs to be coming together and shared with others. And here, we've got a lot further to go. We know that much of this work at the moment in collaborative areas is either information exchange or gaming. And a lot of it is about killing. It's not about joy, about passion, about cherishing. And I'm interested in our movements towards that. A more recent piece that we created last year was called Collective Reality. And here we created a large-scale installation which comes alive when you come together. This is a generative work, and it's as aware of us as we are of it. And it invites you to come into the large space, and it only creates the sounds and visuals linked to the motion and the togetherness of the group that are coming into that space. We did this at Future Fest in London, with large crowds actually coming in, working with dancers to initiate the movement and to take people through the scenarios. We had some lovely encounters, some lovely group works happening. We brought in freestyle footballers who did amazing things in it, and burlesque dancers, so small performances happening within the space too. Got lots of group work happening together. Then we took it to a dome environment. This is SAT in Montreal. Now, I'm not going to do loads on domes today, which I can do a whole other piece on, but actually, domes are it. Domes are definitely the future of immersion. This is a group that we trained in Montreal this year in June. These are all VR software creators and technicians. They are not dancers, they are not movers, but they worked with us for a couple of hours in a workshop to create ultimately this amazing reactive generative sound and visual work within the dome at SAT in Montreal. If you're in Montreal, don't miss going to that dome. It is a wonderful environment to be in, and to experience full immersion in sound and vision in the way that they are commissioning work is really worth it. So we had a great time there with a wonderful group and moved on. We know we've still got a lot to do. We've, all of us, got to focus more on this liveness. What are the links that we can have? How do we get this natural connectivity? How do we translate that into these virtual physical blended experiences? This is a quote from an MA student of mine. He's 23, and we were talking about future love, an area I do a lot of curation in, and he was saying, you know, forget this Tinder lark, you know, and online apps for dating, awful, yeah? You know, in the future, when I find someone I want to have a date with, then he or she might be in Tokyo. And I want our first date to be that they could come to my house as a hologram and have a drink with me. This is liveness too. This is a real-time input. So to move on to my last section, it's about implants. And so I'm going to cover some of what Neil said, but go a little bit into a wider coverage on it. Implants actually, for body implants, as Neil said, we have many already in use. I think there's over 200 body implants now used medically for different things, from your heart pacemaker to much more complex deep brain stimulation implants for Parkinson's and other patients, yeah. Of course, we all have implants in teeth, like Neil pointed out. But here we have Professor Kevin Warwick and his partner, who actually are connected through their implants and actually connected also to their computer systems, both at home and in their workplace. So they can actually work together. They've done masses of testing on implants over the last 20 years. Little tiny grain of rice size implants, which actually can go into the fingertips, into the palm of the hand, often are put into this part of the hand, yeah? And actually, now we know they can go anywhere in the body, and we know the types of metals that are good and work within the body. And these can be used for feeling objects at a distance, feeling heat from a distance, but also, really importantly, to replace many things that we use already. Stellark, I think, is important to mention. Another artist to look up, pioneer in this area of implants and body changes. 30 years or so, Australian artist, incredible work on actually putting forward and pioneering the shifts in our body towards a more cyborg human body. And last year at FutureFest, in my Future Love curation, and this is a Nesta project in London, we did an implant party on stage. We actually did with a Swedish group, Bionifican, who are based in Stockholm, who are an educational group about body implanting. They came and they did implants on stage, biohackers they are, and actually with the director of Nesta had an implant which you can open his telephone with and his laptop with. In the future, we can replace much of what's in our pockets through implants. Whether it's your travel card, your credit card, your key fobs, etc. And I would say now definitely, you know, for children today of 6, 8, their 18th birthday present request will be the implant. It's not going to be the next smartphone. We're well on our way. Implants are happening, implant parties are happening all over the world with 200-300 people lining up at a time for them. It is a movement that is on the go and tried and tested. I haven't got one yet, but I want one. So who else in the room would have an implant like this, a small grain of rice that would actually allow you to use your, instead of using things in your bags? No? Nobody? Yeah, 1, 2? Right, wow. Okay, interesting. This is a ballet dancer who actually has put sensors on her ballet shoes and created an app which allows her to use her feet as a digital paintbrush. Very useful for rehearsal, for reproduction of work, etc. Talking to ballet associations around Europe, as I often do, because I'm coming from a dance background, about the tech scene, the ballet world has no problem on having implants in their big toes. In fact, they are ready for it. That's their point of connection to the world. That's what they draw with. That's how they use space. They're ready to go. And we still have much further to go. Of course, we have cybernetic contact lenses. The bionic lenses are starting to be discussed. We have smart skin circuits and peripheral nervous system interfaces and tattoos. This is actually a skin tattoo, which is stuck on the skin, which can actually move data for you or shift and open things. Replications of things give you information about things like sun exposure, biofeedback to remind you to deal with your diabetic or your tablets needs, etc. Fitness, all linked to the biofeedback, which we are using already in our wearables through our Fitbits, etc. And onwards, there's a lot of experimentation going with actually just gels which actually have been developed for robotic joints, which are actually going to hold information in them. And DNA nanobots, which are actually going to be able to be within fluids, etc. So we'll be able to put things on our skins or around us into joints. This moves us, of course, towards what Neil was talking about. What are we today? And actually, with Neil, I'm actually in this wide sense of if we're humans, and we've moved towards the cyborg, we've moved towards the avatar, most often both at the same time. you have your cyborg presence developing, you have your avatar presence developing. But this is part of the multi-identity of today's world. And actually is potentially much less confusing for people to actually express themselves in these ways than it is to repress the different parts of themselves that they feel. So, to finalize the presentation, this is the collaborative share space of Internet of Bodies that we see for the future, a space where we can share through implants, through sense tech and gesture tech, motion capture, of course, telepresence, and augmented and mixed realities. No wires, no wearables, and no attachments, and no place for flaneuring. You've got to participate in this to actually be part of it and understand it. So we live in this ever-expanding ecosystem. And let's be honest, this is not yet fully understood by anyone, whether it's big business or whether it's the most radical innovators. We're all learning new as we go, which is why it's so exciting. And there is an emergent dynamic pattern, which is complex, really complex, in its patterns of interaction between makers, of which I'm sure many of you are here today, makers, producers, distributors, and the users, because both have got to be creative, and we've got to be creative together. It's quite clear the user is demanding to be creative. We know many of these scenarios which come from the gaming world. We've got those examples coming at us. Experiential narratives that put the user at the center of the interaction, structured improvisations taking place between makers and users, 24/7 interaction where gaming communities want continuous involvement, numerous touch points, virtual and physical, all needing new forms of mediation. And this is all starting to involve our bodies more in the technologies, creating the Internet of Bodies. So how can we collaborate onwards, but also ensuring diversity of content and inclusivity for all? Just one little fact, at the moment, 70% of VR content has been migrated from male heterosexual porn. That is what we're doing. We're literally just transferring the old world into the new world. We seriously have got to aim for a much more diverse content, which attracts a much wider audience as well at the base of it. And that is in terms of gender, of course, but also in culture, in age groups, etc. We know that that diversity is important, and for us to be able to experience this on a much wider sense. Equally, how do we ensure that we're using these tools ethically, particularly our personal body data? As far as I'm concerned, the data that comes from me, that I've shown in these charts, is mine. And actually, I feel a bit the same about it as I do about my organs. I actually carry an organ donor card in my purse, which is the British system. We have to carry a card to say, I'm fine. If you find me dead, then you can use my organs, yeah? But I would feel it would be the same about my data. And we have a huge debate on this in the UK at the moment, with some very good work happening by Nesta and a project called Decode, an EU project, lots of reportage happening on actually my personal data and where that belongs. Looking at many small companies that are starting to create personal data vaults, and this huge discussion with the corporate sector about actually whose data is it? Yeah. Who owns it? Who has the right to use it? Who controls the ethical usage of our data? Yeah. How do we enable a win-win situation so that we're all good in this? Yeah. And as AI emerges and actually starts to merge with human intelligence, how do we ensure that a moral and social framework that is sound and ethical is passed on to future generations? Equally, how do we ensure that physical intimacy, which seems such a risk today, isn't wiped out by the virtual, but actually that the virtual and physical stay merged? The key thing to remember in this is, however you're sitting in your seat today, whether you're here as yourself, personal, independent, or for your company, big or small, we are all in this as personal, independent people. So whatever work you do on personal data affects you, your family, your friends, and everyone around you directly. It's not separate than you. Those decisions are all part of our ethics. So, as our bodies move through these ever-deepening layers, interwoven, non-linear, multi-choice pathways, very fluid pathways, we need to look at our digital selves, and we need to find that natural existence alongside our physical selves. We have mega data flowing around us, I mean, in this space alone, yeah? And actually, those data flows are running around us, they come from us, they come back to us, and they actually, between us, then, we can create an Internet of Bodies, which actually is complementary and working with the Internet of Things and everything else around us. So thank you very much. I'll leave it there with this slide, which is actually very much about collaborative shared space, which pushes the world forward positively. Thanks.
Thank you, Ghislaine. Questions, if we have questions.
There's one there.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Christy. I'm a software developer. And in our software developers community, now there is a trend toward working in distributed team and working from home and things like this. And I was wondering if your project, Me and My Shadow, was used, or if you thought of using for in this area. Like, it can be involved towards creating an environment where we can be in separate places each, but still feel like we are working together in the same room or things like that. And another question will be regarding the previous slide of yours regarding ethics and social moral framework. But as we evolve towards this new type of, I don't know, bodies or what they are going to be, will it apply the same type of thinking regarding moral? Can it be applicable to think in moral terms?
Okay. Thank you. Those are really good questions. So,
thank you.
The first question around the use of projects, collaborative share spaces like Me and My Shadow, for workplace scenario, yes, it is a discussion that we've been having a lot, and I'm presenting often in much more workplace scenarios. So, yes, this kind of space is coming, and you're right. Remote teams, remote data, big data flows, and the ability to work physically with a full body is much needed. So, we are working with corporate and creative industries on these ideas, but I'm very happy to talk further on this because this has got to be a converged effort to make those things happen. The second question about the ethics and morals, very complicated, and I think we will have more today on stage around this, we know we're at a point in time worldwide where ethics and morals are under huge wobbliness, and actually my father said to me years ago, we have to remember every child born has to be taught from scratch ethics and morals, by their families, by their teachers, by their peer group, etc. Whereas actually, the technological world you're born into exists for you at that moment. So, you know, my 13-year-old today never thought any different than having phones around, smartphones around. So we have got a lot of work to do on how to actually disseminate the correct ethics and morals we know, and what are the correct ethics and morals. And we've got a lot of challenges on that from many different countries in the world in many different aspects. So big debate to happen and is happening. AI and ethics, big debate.
Actually, I have a question. This is a 360 camera I'm carrying always with me. But don't you think that some technologies and trends right now are a bit overhyped? And we are talking about problems we don't really have. Because most of the times companies are telling us that, okay, this is, I don't know, the next big thing, this is everything, you know? And after 1 year or 2 years, they said, oh no, actually it wasn't that one. 3D television, for example. So it died. The smartwatch is dying. This thing, it's a niche. So that was my question. Aren't we talking about problems we don't really have?
I think I'm working from a research to practice. So I work very deep in research, and I then take out and take to large-scale public some of that research and then reevaluate back and forward. In in my university work, research periods are considered 30 to 40 years for things to actually move through. Multiple testings and prototypes and failures, which actually, you know, the answer's here. Oh, no, it's not. It fell, yeah? The next big answer, and everyone's shouting about it. And
that's what I was saying.
So I think you're absolutely right. We're on this up and down thing, and it's natural in the play of research processing, but also in another way, what has happened through the digital technologies we know has happened at incredible speed. Yeah, personally, I think VR headsets, for example, will be used for medical reasons, for health and well-being reasons, for education, for personal training. There's many reasons why you may want to really immerse yourself in learning a language or etc. But in terms of developments for more collective thinking, which we do want to do, we've still got other things to find. So maybe some of those VR headsets will end up dusty on the back of a toy shelf beyond when the next things come through the gaming companies.
Actually, that's what happened with mine. So it's
right,
staying
already.
on the shelf. So
no, that's a bit quick.
Yeah. My kids used it. I don't know, 2 more months, but that was it.
Yeah.
You know? Questions over there.
You've said that in the UK there are talks about ethical handling of personal data. But with the UK leaving the European Union, there are signs for the UK implementing more surveillance by the GCHQ and other organizations. So I don't think we are actually moving in a positive direction here.
Well, as you're right, UK is we're the most surveyed country in the world, I think. I live in London, and as far as I know, this is probably even a bit out of date now, as I move around London, over 400 cameras a day will take my image, yeah? Whether it's on the underground or wherever, public spaces, etc. So, however, these we have quite a strong debate culture, and there is no question that in the UK, every single thing like this is deeply debated. So I can tell you the British Museum are on it, the British Library, Nesta, which is an independent think tank, Demos, there's a lot of key people. And in all our universities, we have AI and ethical discussions going on. So the Nesta project, Decode, they're part of a big European project. That will continue to exchange and share around Europe. So we don't go down without debate in the UK, so there's a lot of fight back, and we will continue to share that. I don't want Brexit, but if it happens, we continue to share.
One more question. We have time for one more question, if there is one.
It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, GHISLAINE.
Thank you.